Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'd like to thank the India Foundation for inviting me here. This is my first time, and I'm really impressed with the gathering here and the speakers which I've seen. It's really quite a scintillating debate and conversation which is happening here. They fortunately told me that I could speak on anything I wanted. So I've chosen a subject which I think is development and dissent. I basically believe that the Indian state, by which I mean the government and bureaucrats and politicians, has become its own worst enemy. And that's the fundamental issue that I would like to talk about today. While the Indian citizen has evolved, becoming more demanding for better social services and a better standard of living, the Indian state, by which I mean the government, has witnessed two contradicting trends. It has become bigger, in fact, in my view, bloated, but the standard of services offered by it has deteriorated dramatically. I believe the government has become a major hindrance to the growth of this country. The much-touted reforms of 1991 of Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao were very much needed. They were like taking off the chains of a prisoner, but not letting him out of the prison. Liberalization was hailed as revolutionary, but I believe it was just tinkering. He was just streamlining processes. He did not take on the bureaucracy in terms of cutting it down to its size. The country needed surgery, but he gave it homeopathy. And that too, he made no song and dance about it. It was reform by stealth. And maybe, perhaps, that's the only way you get reform done in India. Besides, liberalization did not change the colonial mindset of the bureaucracy, which was to control the company and be served rather than be of service. I believe no leader yet has taken up the challenge to fundamentally reform the bureaucracy. I believe this has not happened because of the unholy nexus between politicians and bureaucrats, where neither of them wants to give up their power of patronage. Let me give you some specifics with some of the problems. As I said, the state is too big. Before he himself joined the government, economist Bibek Debroy, who is quite celebrated, did an analysis for India Today magazine in 2013 on useless ministries. He suggested that 31 ministries out of 55 at that time, ranging from animal husbandry to tourism, be scrapped, and the remaining be restructured into 12 major ministries of commerce, trade and industry, consumer affairs, infrastructure, defense, law and corporate affairs, external affairs, home, finance, social sectors, energy and natural resources, and science and technology. He calculated that this would have an overall effect of saving of 1,50,000 crores. Many ministries oversee entities which are supposed to be autonomous. Like INB oversees Doordarshan and AIR, which is supposed to be autonomous. Steel, Mines and Power ministries monitor SAIL, Coal India, and a host of other PSUs. But one of the most classic examples is civil aviation. Civil aviation has 4 regulators. AERA, which regulates tariffs, AAAY, which regulates airports, DGCA, which regulates airlines, BCAS, which regulates ground handling. In USA, there is no aviation ministry and no regulators. All aviation aspects are handled by FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. Now compare the two sizes of the two markets. India has 450 airstrips and airports, out of which only 75 have scheduled operations. In comparison, the US has 19,299 airports and airstrips. In US, the monthly passenger traffic for scheduled airlines is 7.44 crores. In comparison, just 83.81 lakh passengers fly in India every month. There are some 96 regional and national carriers in the US compared to a total of 11 airlines in India. The number of planes flown in India by scheduled airlines is 468. The fleet size of US commercial airlines, including regional, stands at 6,871 in 2015. So you can see the contrast. And it tells you that why do you need a civil aviation ministry? And you can apply this to many other ministries. The crux of the matter is that departments and ministries are created not on economic or administrative logic, but political accommodation. Such is the multiplicity that if one wants to improve sports facilities for women in rural areas, it is not one, but 7 ministries you'll have to deal with. Rural development, social justice, sports, youth affairs, finance, women and child welfare, and Panchayati Raj that will be involved. How can you ever get anything done if this is the complex procedure you have to go through? In fact, it makes my blood boil when I read about the fact that, we talk a lot about what's happening in the LOC and the soldiers fighting there and our martyrs there. And the fact that so many of their supplies, normal ammunition, boots, night vision binoculars, normal things which are not available for our soldiers there. And why? Because it's stuck in this Byzantine bureaucracy, which just cannot make a decision. And somebody doesn't address that. We make a lot of noise about patriotism, right? But we never get down to the nitty-gritty of finding out why things don't happen the way they should happen. And there's a new trend now. Instead of cutting ministries under one minister, there's a new trend of combining incongruous ministries, making for strange bedfellows. What has chemical and fertilizers got to do with parliamentary affairs or urban development, housing and urban poverty alleviation with information and broadcasting? And there's so many other examples in this government. The number of departments in the government of India was 18 in 1947, and the number of secretaries of the government of India was 19, and that of IAS officers, 143. Today, there are 134 IAS officers just at secretary level postings, while the number of IAS officers posted in central government is 820, and the total number of IAS officers is 4,800. In 1947, Jawaharlal Nehru's cabinet had 17 ministers. By 2016, the Council of Ministers had 75 ministers. 2 administrative reforms commissions in 1996 and 2009 advocated small governments, but still no decision has been taken on this. The second Administrative Reform Commission, in fact, recommended an integrated approach of combining ministries. Most logical, Ministry of Transport put together civil aviation, surface transport, railways and shipping, and you have one minister. Today there are 3 ministers for this. Similarly for energy. But all this makes eminent sense. But the unholy alliance I mentioned earlier just won't let it happen. It requires bold, selfless leadership to do this, which I don't see forthcoming. Not just that. Liberalization has created its own bureaucracy, a permanent establishment that forever remains in power. 2012, of the 11 new regulators set up for new areas such as telecom and electricity regulations, 9 were retired bureaucrats, creating an establishment that is inherently geared to preserve the status quo. Even the new rights created their own bureaucratic infrastructure. In 20 states, for instance, the Chief Information Commissioner under the Right of Information Act is the state's former Chief Secretary. So it's all jobs for the boys. The point is that we have progressed from a Nehruvian model of state-controlled economy to a more market-friendly one. Logically, the bureaucracy should have shrunk, or at least should not have grown to the enormous size it has. One radical solution, which Nandan Nilekani has talked about, is to introduce 10 startups or missions in the system of 10 people each to handle 10 challenges identified by the Prime Minister, ranging from education to poverty. It should achieve 2 things: allow bureaucrats to develop much-needed specializations and ensure that professionals come in and work with governments, much as Vikram Sarabhai started ISRO and Homi Bhabha started TIFR all those years ago. This is apart from restructuring ministries, greater use of technology, and greater share of private sector in delivering public service, which would put us in the right direction. But in today's context, I just don't see this happening. Problem number 2. The state has no business being in business is a slogan ringing in my ears since the 2014 general election. Let us see what has happened in this front. Recently, Niti Aayog gave a list of 74 loss-making PSUs to the PMO. These should be shut down forthwith instead of some attempts to revive some of them. So far, the government has decided to shut only 10 PSUs. This is a good beginning, but what about the other 64? Good money is being spent on bad. Rupees 50,772 crores were provided to the 74 units between 2004 and 16, and these 6 central public sector enterprises owe over 33,000 crores to the center. And the story goes on. CAG has said there are 157 central PSUs with accumulated losses of 1 lakh crores. That's $16.5 billion of 2014-15, which is larger than Zimbabwe's GDP in 2014 and bigger than the economies of at least 65 countries. The latest survey says we have 298 central PSUs. The total investment made by the government in them till March 31st, 2015 is over 10 lakh crores, approximately the amount that is needed to develop India's 7,500 kilometers of long coastline through its ambitious Sagarmala infrastructure project. The planned investment for central PSUs for 2014 is 2 lakh crores. Then, of course, there's the story of the public sector banks. I'll skip all the figures and just tell you that pile-up of bad loans is up to about 13 lakh crores. And then that bank nationalization actually happened for cynical political reasons from Mrs. Gandhi. It's not really economically needed. She just needed it for her own loan melas and Garibi Hatao programs. So why does the government continue to have a presence in areas where it has clearly no domain expertise? No government has shown the stomach for disinvestment in PSUs. The only government that tried to do anything about loss-making PSUs was the coalition government of Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, which sold 28 loss-making units to private players. And most of them are doing pretty well. So there's an obvious lesson there. And remarkably, the Modi government recently asked cash-rich public sector firms, ONGC, NTPC, and Coal India to adopt one closed urea plant each for revival, which would cost them about 18,000 crores for the next 4 years. The government has already announced its plan to set up 4 steel plants in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, and Karnataka, the first state-owned greenfield projects that will come in this sector in almost 4 decades. This does not look like a government that doesn't want to be in business. It's a government who wants to do more business. Frankly, I believed candidate Modi when he raised that slogan. And when he was elected, I said to myself, we're going to get radical change. Now, in my small way, I will only believe if they are serious about it when they sell Ashoka Hotel and Air India, because those will be signature acts. Problem 3, the state delivery mechanism is flawed. Rajiv Gandhi said you get only 17 paisa delivered to the beneficiary. 2009, Monteko Ahluwalia said 16 paisa. But in spite of knowing all this, we continue to proliferate government schemes. There's no match between outlays and outcome. There are many reasons for this. I'm running short of time, so I'll skip all that. I think one of the reasons also is, why the bureaucracy is stuck is this whole business of there's incentive not to take any decisions. Section 13 of the Prevention of Corruption Act defines what constitutes criminal misconduct by a public servant, and this has not been able to be amended, which I think is the main reason why the bureaucracy doesn't make decisions. There's a lack of encouragement for innovative thinking. We run many articles on something which I feel strongly about is surplus army land. There are cantonments right in the middle of a city, right, which were there for historic reasons, should easily be moved out, money generated, right, and used for something else. And the same applies for railway land. innovative thinking, which is what is required. Problem 4, there is a more philosophical point. Make the bureaucrat invested in the system. The middle class has seceded from the state. Those who can afford it don't use state services. Education, health, access to water, transport, and security are so abysmal, India's middle class and elite rarely, if ever, use them. Until bureaucrats start sending their children and to government schools or start going to public hospitals apart from AIIMS, they will not improve in quality. It's a vicious circle. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to have depressed you. As Ruchi Sharma says, India disappoints both optimists and pessimists, but hope is eternal. The Modi government has shown some mettle in repealing over 1,000 outdated laws, in identifying 10 loss-making PSUs for stake sale, and improving conduct rules, even ending the transfer posting Raj and changing the appraisal system. Now it has to show that it's capable of reform itself more radically, and not in the way so eloquently described by the Chief Economic Advisor, Arvind Subramanian. He calls it persistent, encompassing incremental reforms, a phrase that to me actually embodies the whole problem. Incremental reforms. We have to stop being a nation of tinkerers. We need audacity in our public policy. The country is bursting with youthful entrepreneurial energy and innovative ideas. The government needs to get out of the way to let them flourish. Lastly, sir, at the risk of not being invited for dinner tonight, I must say that my deepest disappointment in Indian politics is that BJP has not occupied the space of a genuine right-wing, market-friendly party. Instead, it seems to have remained a party espousing cottage industry capitalism and embroiling itself in peripheral issues in a manner not befitting its massive mandate. But then, as I said, hope springs internal. Maybe the India Foundation can persuade them to fill this vacuum.